A woman secretly built $47 million company after quitting her job as an accountant. And I thought that this would be like a super cool story and article to kind of go over because that just sounds super awesome, right? So, a savvy businesswoman has revealed how she managed to build a fashion firm now worth a whopping $47 million while keeping it hidden from her parents for 2 years. Australian fashion guru Jane Liu started Showpo, Showpo, formerly Show Pony in 2010, selling clothes online, but her parents thought she was working as an accountant at a well-known firm. So Jane's parents, Queenie, 61, and Frank Liu, 67, were migrants from China and worked as cleaners in Sydney after arriving in the country when Jane was 8 years old. But they had high hopes for the daughter, who worked at Ernst & Young, a large reputable accountancy firm in Australia, and Jane didn't know how to tell them she hated it. They only found out when she surprised them by paying off their mortgage, even buying them a car, when her company suddenly boomed. Now, you might think like that's crazy, right? Like, how could she not tell her parents? How could she like hide this from her parents? Like, wouldn't she like be super proud? The thing that you gotta understand, right? Because she is from a different culture from a lot of people, right? The Asian culture, right, is extremely focused on status in the eyes of like the parents, where like if you're not a doctor, if you're not a lawyer, if you're not a high tier professional, right, you're basically scum, right? I mean, just being blunt, right? And that is the reason why if you've met any Asian person in school, right? Guess what they typically are basically always ending up doing? They typically will always end up scoring better than almost everyone else because their parents are basically not always forcing them, but basically the structure of the household is set up in a way to where you will do these things to become this type of person, or you're basically nothing, right? It's also another common thing where like a lot of parents in Asian households pretty much don't really ever say I love you as well, even though they might actually love their kids. It's just not a very common thing. It's very like get what you need to get done so that you can be a good adult, basically. But I think this is super amazing. I think this is I think the way that she basically showed it to them, they're like, hey, guess what? I did my own thing and it's making so much money that I'm able to take care of you, right? Like, I think that's an awesome way to go about and doing it because you want to be able to prove to your parents that your interest is able to provide for yourself, but also create like a good life for yourself, right? Where like regardless of status, the money itself could end up taking care of whatever you need to get taken care of. So I think this is a perfect way for her to go about and doing it. So until then, she would sit next to her mom on the bus each morning pretending to go to her accounting job. I would put on my suit every day, I would get the bus into the city with my mom, and I was carrying around the empty laptop bag. I was definitely questioning my life decisions a lot back then, but there was no going back, Jane told the Australian Financial Review produced podcast How I Made It. Now again, right? Like this is the sad thing about it because like you'd want her to be like proud, right? Like you'd want her to be open and honest with her parents, but she couldn't do that, right? So realizing that she couldn't do this job for the rest of my life, Jane jumped at the opportunity in 2010 when a friend suggested they start a business selling clothes from a pop-up stall. So she quit her job and maxed out her credit card to buy stock and stuffed clothes in a garbage bag she hid at home with her parents. But her partner, not long after, pulled out despite his quick success, instead choosing a more secure full-time job. Now this is interesting, right? Because in this one statement, right, it basically shows that she was willing to pretty much do whatever it took, right? Like maxing out her credit card, which I do not recommend anyone ever doing, but maxing out her credit card to basically put everything on the line to get it to work so that she could have a chance at actually pulling it off. But her friend, her partner, did not have the spine to risk it all. So Jane, although devastated, saw it through but chose to take the business online rather than try to manage a brick and mortar shopfront, which is pretty smart. The online fashion thing was only starting out, but it was quickly getting bigger, she said. At the time, it just seemed like a really low risk way of doing things. I didn't have the confidence to go it alone in person, so this way I could hide behind the website. See, like this statement, right? Like you kind of feel for her, right? Like in this thing, because she was probably so scared just like starting off her business in that situation. Is like, hey, like, can I do this? Will it be successful? Can I even make a dime from this? Right? So seeing something like this, like you could kind of like tell, like, Jesus, you know? She was like willing to put it all, but she was just so scared. So after a slow few months, Jane had a light bulb moment and decided to launch a Facebook campaign, which instantly helped boost her reach. So in the space of 1 month, Shopify reportedly shot from 3,000 to 20,000 followers, and by 2012, Jane moved out of her parents' garage and into a warehouse. Up until this point, she still hadn't told her parents, but by then, she was making enough money to support them too. She was able to pay off their mortgage and buy them a car, which made them finally accept her successful career path. So the CEO admitted that her parents were shocked and they just couldn't believe how I had the balls. Today, Shopify has 1.8 million followers on Instagram, 1.3 million on Facebook, and 95,700 on its newly launched TikTok page. Jane, who is now married with a child, is regarded as one of Australia's most successful self-made businesswomen. The clothing website reportedly turned over a huge $63,853,000 in 2019 alone, and she's made the AFR's Young Rich list every year since 2017. And despite her millions, Jane remains humble and married the man of her dreams in a bargain $222 dress from her Shopify wedding collection. Now that's just basically a straight up plug to her company. She still pinches herself every day because of what she's been able to achieve, although imposter syndrome is still very much alive. You need to be able to stop pushing the goalpost every time you reach one, she said. You've got to tell yourself not to overthink it. That's what I tell myself every day. Stop thinking. Okay, I personally love this story. I thought this was pretty cool, right? But I think to learn from this situation alone is to be willing to risk it all for your goals, right? Now, I'm not saying like do something like dangerous or something like that, right? Or like do something stupid. But if your goal is to like start a business, do everything that you need to do as fast and as hard as possible that you possibly can, right? So what I mean by this, let's say that you have a goal of getting out of debt, which by the way, if you want to learn how to get out of debt, go to 40bucks.com. But let's say that you have a goal of paying off your student loans, right? Well, you have to be willing to do things that other people do not have the spine or do not have the emotional fortitude to do to actually achieve your goal, right? For example, If you go to 40inbox.com and you can learn a very simple to understand way to get out of debt, right? But it is not super easy to get out of debt, right? It takes work, right? You got to grind at it, right? It's going to be hard to do sometimes, right? Because sometimes you're going to be like, man, I just want to wake up and go party or something like that, right? But if that is your goal, if your goal is to get out of debt, you have to work super hard at it, right? You have to be willing to sacrifice fun time that you want to like just enjoy with all your friends and doing basically stupid stuff, spending all of your money on like pretty clothes or whatever, right? To just paying off your debt so that later on in life you could live an amazing life with no stress, with a fully funded emergency fund, fully funded 401k, Roth IRA, all of your retirements, a brokerage account, pay off your house, right? To be able to be in a financial situation to where you could actually have so much excess money that you could end up just helping other people just because you want to, right? I mean, imagine if you got to the point in your life where you had no debt, you had an emergency fund, all of your retirements were basically taken care of, you had a paid off house, right? Or condo, whichever thing that you kind of prefer, and you had so much excess cash that you could literally just go to someone who is struggling and get them back on their feet, right? Let's say that you know someone who's homeless, right? And they're like in the rare circumstances where they're homeless and all they need, right, is to actually just have a place to lay their head in a safe location to be able to take a shower and then end up basically going to work or applying for jobs that way, right? You could change their life forever, right? If you got to that point. But you can only get to that point by first be willing to sacrifice the things that other people are not willing to sacrifice so that you can live a life that no one else is really living. So stay tuned for more. And again, if you want to learn how to get out of debt, go to 40inbox.com.